3 haunted home intrusion tales revealed. Sinister encounters that exposed terrifying secrets. Every sun-soaked evening in Maplewood looked like a postcard, but behind the white picket fences, dark secrets simmered. Sarah felt it the moment she donned her uniform for the diner shift, an impending dread tightening her chest. Shadows seemed to creep longer as twilight blanketed her neighborhood, proving that appearances could be deceiving. Alone with her sleepless thoughts, the night whispered to her a chilling, persistent whispering that brought the hair on the back of her neck to a standstill. It happened as Sarah tucked her children into bed. A creaking noise rose from below. Could it have been the old floorboards, or something worse? It rattled her, yet she brushed it off, blaming exhaustion from working double shifts. But the eerie sounds multiplied at night, accompanied by an unsettling presence that made her feel as though the shadows beyond her window were alive, reaching for her. They were no longer just shadows. They felt like eyes watching, waiting. And then there was Mr. Thompson. With a friendly smile that disarmed even the most cautious neighbor, he lingered too long during conversations, training looks on her children that made her skin crawl. What was innocent curiosity? What should have been friendly neighborly behavior twisted into something darker in her mind? The gossip from mothers at the park filtered into her thoughts, his name often associated with urban legends, hints of a past riddled with disappearances. Were they true? With every rattling breath, paranoia seeped deeper. Then came the night her entire world splintered. Sarah woke to find her home empty, the silence too heavy to bear. Josh? Lily? Panic crashed over her like icy water, freezing her limbs. She tore through the house, calling their names louder, hoping for answers, but all that echoed was stillness. The air thickened with dread. And then, a knock on the door, soft yet somehow sinister. Heart racing, she opened it to Mr. Thompson. He leaned on the threshold, that same disarming smile plastered on his face. I thought they might be here for a game. His presence morphed the lingering fear into raw terror. Something was wrong. Something was off. He stepped closer, his mere proximity like a storm cloud looming overhead. The steady rhythm of her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Uncertainty buzzed in the air like static. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to run. She turned back to the house, each creak behind her feeling like a warning, while fear ignited her need to protect her children before the facade of suburban normality crumbled. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But there was no time for comfort. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. Frantically analyzing all the stories whispered in the dark, she felt a single harsh truth. The suburbs weren't as safe as they appeared. Mr. Thompson was not just a neighbor. He was the embodiment of the terror that lurked so close yet felt so far. With the moonlight casting long shadows, fear clawed at her resolve. Could she unearth the truth hiding behind the community's perfect smile? Would she fall victim to the monster that dwelled in plain sight? As she stepped away, her heart thudded, the air cold with the reality that her next move might seal her fate, leaving everything hanging in the balance, waiting for a decision that felt impossible. Every instinct screamed at Sarah to escape. She whipped around, rushing back inside. The house felt like a twisted maze now, shadows darting with unsettling energy. The doors and windows loomed large, tight around her as the hairs on her arms rose. "Josh! Lily!" she shouted, her voice high and frantic. Silence. Only the soft murmur of wind outside accompanied her, its whispers feeling like taunts. Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Each pulse became a reminder of the looming danger. She stumbled into the living room, where the dim light flickered nervously. The house felt too empty, too quiet, as if it held its breath, waiting. Then, the sound came again, a soft thud from above, the unmistakable shuffling of footsteps across the floorboards. Sarah's stomach knotted as dread surged through her. No. It can't be. A shiver slid down her spine. Her children were missing, and now, there was someone upstairs. With each cautious step, she edged toward the staircase. The air grew heavier, thickening with anticipation. If there was anything about to happen, it felt like time itself had started to draw away, leaving her stranded on the edge of a dark precipice. She gripped the railing, knuckles white, and forced her feet forward. Upstairs, the hallway was shadowy, the light from the moon barely illuminating the path. Breathing heavily, she reached for the door to her children's room, hesitating just for a moment. What if they were asleep, blissfully unaware of the terror surrounding them? What if they weren't? Pushing the door open, she found the room empty. The beds unmade, toys scattered across the floor. The overwhelming urge to scream bubbled in her throat. Panic blinded her. Where could they be? And then, the front door creaked open behind her. Sarah? It was Mr. Thompson's voice, sweet and innocent like honey, but it dripped with something foul. Have you found them? I've been looking everywhere. Her heart raced in alarm. How had he gotten inside? She darted to the closet, huddling amongst the scattered clothes, her breath held tight. She heard him step into the room, his movements casual the way someone would stroll through a home they knew well. Where could they be hiding? He mused. I can help you look. Just tell me where they are. A soft crash echoed from downstairs, making her heartbeat spike. It wasn't her children. It was something heavier, something deliberate. Her instincts screamed again. He was lying. She forced herself not to move, hoping the darkness would swallow her whole. Sarah, Mr. Thompson's voice flowed through the air like smoke, slithering into her mind. They're not safe. They shouldn't be alone. I can help you. Frantically, she glanced around the closet, searching for anything to defend herself with if it came to that. Her hands trembled, trying to quiet the rising panic. The shadows felt louder as he called again. Then, the sound of a giggle floated through the air, sweet and innocent. A giggle that didn't belong to her children. Thompson's attention snapped toward the door. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching over her hiding spot. What was that? Holding her breath, Sarah watched as he moved toward the sound, leaving the closet door just slightly ajar. With the small slit of space, she could see him pause, fingers brushing against the wall as he leaned in. She edged out, wrestling with the knowledge that every moment spent lurking in the shadows was one more chance for him to discover her. But she had one goal: to find her kids. With the slightest turn of her head, one question loomed above her. What had she unleashed by trusting her instincts? Just then, the giggling erupted again, echoing from the basement. The soft giggle sent a chill through Sarah. It wasn't the laughter of her children. It sounded distorted, twisted in a way that sent a rush of cold fear racing down her spine. She forced her eyes to stay on Mr. Thompson, who had paused, frozen with his hand still resting against the wall. His head tilted slightly, straining to hear. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice low and shaky, as if he too were touched by the dread that clung to the air. Sarah knew she had to act. The basement, a place they often told stories about, a space filled with old memories and cobwebs. What was down there? The thought threatened to immobilize her, but the instinct to find her children pushed her forward. With a deep breath, she slipped out of the closet, careful not to make a sound. She slipped past the door, keeping her back pressed against the wall, the cool wood a slight comfort against the heat of her racing pulse. The shadows seemed to cling to her, but offered no real refuge. As she moved toward the stairs, her mind raced. Did he know where they were? Had he heard that sound too? The basement door sat ajar at the end of the hall, the dark yawning space below awaiting her. "Sarah," he called softly again, a hint of something sharp in his tone. "You shouldn't go alone. Let me help you." His insistence twisted in her gut, a sickening notion of trust buried under tidal waves of fear. She didn't comprehend what he wanted, but the urgency of the giggle invisible in the dark was unbearable. She reached the edge of the steps, peering down into the murky gloom of the basement. "Josh!" "Lily!" she called, her voice spilling into the silence that hung heavy. "Nothing." Holding her breath, she leaned down further, trying to make out anything mysterious that lurked below. Shadows danced in the flickering light from the hallway above. Just then, she heard it again, the giggle, more pronounced this time, echoing in a way that felt electric and alive. Without thinking, she took a step down. The wood creaked beneath her weight, a loud, protesting sound that made her freeze. She glanced back at Mr. Thompson, who had suddenly gone rigid, his eyes fixed intently on the basement stairs. "Stay away from there," he said, his voice escalating in a way that filled Sarah with dread. Her heart pounded as she considered her next move, but the giggle rang out again, luring her deeper into the dark. She needed to know. Was it really her kids? Another step, and the cold air of the basement washed over her, chilling her skin. "Josh!" "Lily!" she shouted once more, voice breaking as she turned the final corner into the darkness. The basement opened up, shadows pooling in corners, like hungry beasts waiting for prey. A collection of old toys lay scattered across the floor, remnants of memories gone by. And then she saw it, a flicker of movement, a glimpse of a small figure darting among the shadows. Just as she strained to make it out, Mr. Thompson lunged forward, his heavy footsteps breaking through her thoughts. "Don't!" he shouted, panic twisting his face. Sarah turned, adrenaline rushing through her, but fear held her in place. "Where are they?" she cried, desperation taking her voice. "They shouldn't be down there," he said, his voice trembling. Just as realization struck, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The basement door slammed shut behind her, a sharp crack reverberating in the enclosed space. The darkness felt alive. Shadows lashed out. Suddenly, the giggling erupted into a chorus, dozens of voices rising like a ghastly symphony. Sarah's heart raced, every instinct screaming at her to flee. What had she stumbled into? And then, beneath the cacophony, one single whisper echoed, unmistakable and terrifying, "You shouldn't have come here." In that moment, Sarah understood she was no longer hunting for her children. She was being hunted. What deeper darkness awaited her in the depths of the basement? The darkness closed in around Sarah like a heavy blanket, suffocating and thick. The echoes of laughter grew louder, spiraling into frenzied giggles that seemed to wrap around her, tightening like a noose. Her mind raced, clawing for a way to make sense of it all. Where were her children? What had she walked into? Let them go. She screamed into the thick air, her voice laced with panic. No response. Just more laughter, a harmony of childish delight twisted into something sinister. It wasn't just the tone that unsettled her, but the knowledge that this mirth had no connection to joy. Each shriek seemed to mock her, teasing her desperate pleas. Mr. Thompson's shadow loomed at the top of the stairs, his figure dark and ominous. "You shouldn't be down there," he called again, his voice a raw edge of fear. There was a desperation in his eyes that sent a shiver down her spine, but his presence also made her hesitate. Could he truly be trying to protect her, or did he know something more? Ignoring him, she stepped fully into the basement, the soft light hardly making a difference. With each step deeper into the abyss, the air grew colder, biting at her skin. It felt wrong, like walking into a dreadful secret that should have remained buried. "Josh!" "Lily!" she implored again, her voice a fragile thread in the howling void around her. But her breath hung in the air, heavy and insistent, only to disappear into the shadows. Then, a flicker caught her eye, a brief movement to her right. She whirled around, hope ignited in her chest. "Is that you?" No answer came, just that same giggle, now closer, more taunting. She dashed towards the sound, driven by a mother's instinct and the desperation that clawed at her throat. "Please, where are you?" Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs, the fear morphing into adrenaline-fueled determination. When she reached the back wall of the basement, the darkness felt almost alive. She pressed her hand flat against the damp wood, pushing against it. Suddenly, a chill wrapped around her like icy fingers. She staggered back, gasping for air. The giggles turned into whispers, coaxing her, pulling her toward a corner that seemed to draw in the light, a dark void amidst the shadows. Something shifted near the corner. A small figure darted out just for a heartbeat before disappearing once more. "Josh?" she shouted, her voice slicing through the thickened night. "Is that you?" Laughter erupted, drawing nearer, merging into the decorum of the basement, wrapping around her as if it were alive. The weight in the air pressed down harder, the sounds echoing and twisting into something grotesque. Panic surged anew, a wave crashing over her mind as she felt a sudden shift in the air, like a breath she hadn't taken. Was this a cruel trick? Were they at play, lost in their games? Or was her mind fracturing under the pressure of this nightmare? "Get a grip," she commanded herself, forcing her eyes to focus. Ahead, she noticed a small, irregular outline, a door, perhaps, barely visible against the wall of shadows. It stood slightly ajar, inviting and ominous all at once. With trembling hands, Sarah reached for the doorknob, heart pounding in her ears. The giggles intensified, morphing into shrieks of delight that flooded the darkness, drowning her thoughts in terror. Just as she was about to push the door wide open, the temperature dropped even more, and the whispers crescendoed into an unbearable cacophony, drowning out her thoughts. She froze, electrified with dread. Something was behind her. Suddenly she felt cold breath against her neck. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered, sending shockwaves of fear down her spine. Now cornered, she turned slowly, dread pooling in the pit of her stomach. What had she awakened in the depths of that basement? And then she saw it, a figure cloaked in darkness, eyes glinting, twisted into something that should not exist. "Mommy!" A voice called, childlike and sweet, cutting through the chaos like a dagger. It echoed with innocence, and yet held the weight of impending doom. Sarah's heart sank as horror washed over her. The worst was yet to come. What new terror awaited her as she drew closer to the sound of her children? The figure stepped forward, its features indistinguishable, swallowed by shadows that seemed to animate its every move. Every instinct within Sarah screamed at her to flee, yet the voice calling her beckoned with insatiable urgency. "Mommy!" The word cut into the murky depths of dread. It sounded just like Lily, her sweet girl, but twisted. The sweet tone now harbored something venomous. It hung in the air, heavy with an unsettling familiarity that gnawed at her sanity. "Where are you, honey?" Sarah's voice shook, each word laced with a mixture of hope and terror. Mentally, she fought against the shred of despair creeping into her heart. The sound of laughter erupted again, twisted and maniacal, a chorus echoing from every corner, bouncing off the unforgiving walls of the basement. The figure paused, tilting its head in an animalistic way that sent a shiver racing down her spine. "You shouldn't be here. Mommy, games are not for grown-ups." The laughter raised its pitch, scraping against her thoughts. "Please, just tell me where they are," she screamed, fear crumbling her voice until it was barely a whisper. But the figure only giggled, its shadows dancing in sinister mockery. It seemed to grow denser, thicker, surrounding her, pushing her back toward the trembling doorknob she had reached for only moments before. She could feel the air pressing against her like a living creature, closing in tighter and tighter. "Join us in play," it whispered, the voice morphing into an unholy blend of her children's laughter. "They want you to play. Let them go." Sarah shrieked, her breath sharp and panicked. She lunged towards the door. Something was terribly wrong about the laughter, transforming it into a phantasmagoria of horrors. Her fingers curled around the cold doorknob, but the shadows shifted, swirling around her like a tempest. In a moment of primal instinct, Sarah twisted the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged. Her heart crashed against her rib cage as she pulled frantically, muscles straining against the invisible force that pressed her back. "Mommy, don't!" the filmy voice cried, echoing with an urgency that pierced the chaos. It sounded like Josh. Her heart plummeted, splitting into pieces as she fought against the crushing reality. Without realizing it, she backed right into the figure. A cold hand gripped her shoulder, the sensation sparking an electric horror. It leaned in closer, breath chilling her skin as it hissed. "It's time to join them." With a final desperate push, Sarah threw herself against the door one last time. This time, the knob yielded with a creak. The door swung open, and she stumbled forward, gasping for freedom. Yet the basement didn't let go easily. "What have you done?" the figure screeched, its voice abandoning all pretense of innocence. Suddenly, the laughter escalated into a wailing crescendo, a cacophony of lost souls and malicious glee. Sarah could feel the space behind her pulling at her consciousness, begging her to turn back, inviting her to succumb. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, pushing her onwards, away from that suffocating darkness. She dashed out of the basement, racing back to the stairs. The light from above threatened to blind her, but she did not care. She needed to escape. With a desperate leap, she surged up the stairs, heart hammering. But just before she reached the top, the light flickered off, swallowed by the encroaching night. An icy laugh whispered through the suffocating darkness, resonating with something deep and terrible. As she burst into the hallway, Sarah turned, her breath fogging in the air, only to find the basement door slowly creaking closed, shadows melding back into place, like they were never disturbed. "Mommy!" a voice echoed, soft, innocent, yet tainted with a new edge of dread. The words spilled through the air, awakening her worst fears. "Where are you?" Outside the chaos, the familiar echoed laughter wormed its way through her mind as she stood frozen before the door. And then, without a warning, a chill wind swept through the hallway, filling it with whispers that spoke of ancient and dark secrets. What happened down there? Did she truly escape, or was there something more waiting for her, even now? The hallway felt impossibly long as Sarah stood trembling, her heart pounding against her chest like a frantic drum. Each second seemed to stretch, taunting her with the promise of something terrible lurking just out of sight. The shadows seemed to pulse, a living tapestry of voids eager to consume her. She forced herself to turn, casting desperate glances around the dimly lit space. The remnants of her home appeared different, warped by shadows that receded and swelled like breathing entities. The familiar contours of their living room, once a sanctuary, morphed into a menacing labyrinth. "Lily? Josh?" she called, her voice cracking. Silence answered, thick and suffocating, wrapping around her like a noose. Each breath felt labored, tainted with a sense of dread that hung in the air. "Please answer me." The laughter from the basement echoed in her mind, entwining with the silence around her. It was an echo of insanity, tantalizing and treacherous. "Mommy, come and play." The voice wound its way through the air, a mocking reminder of her children that felt like a dagger to her heart. Forcing herself to move, Sarah stepped carefully into the living room. The fascination of home was gone. In its place was an overwhelming disquiet. As she advanced, shadows darted across the walls, playing tricks on her mind. She began to question her senses. Were elements of her home shifting? Or was it her attention faltering under the weight of fear? She reached for the light switch, clutching it like a lifeline, but the bulb flickered, then extinguished completely. Darkness reigned, swallowing her whole. The emptiness grew deeper, almost tangible, tendrils of fear wrapping around her throat. "Where are you?" she whispered into the dense void, desperate for a reply. "Mommy, we're waiting." The voice, this time low and throaty, bounced off the walls. The sound resonated within her, like the malicious laugh of the figure that had plagued the basement. Terror gripped her like iron. Fumbling through the hopeless blackness, she reached for the couch, finding solace in the familiar texture of the fabric. Her fingertips brushed against something cold and metallic. She froze, heart racing wildly. It couldn't be, not here. Grabbing the object, she flicked it on. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, illuminating the room in sharp slices of reality. But what it revealed was suffocating. Toys lay scattered across the floor. Lily's doll, Josh's game controller, details filled with unsettling significance. "Help us, Mommy!" The ghostly refrain hung thick in the air, twisting her insides. Guilt gnawed at her. She had left them. Her heart ached for their safety, yet dread twisted her stomach. "Stop it!" she yelled, more to herself than to the empty room. "Stop it!" But her voice trembled, betraying her fear. She couldn't break down. She couldn't lose herself now. Just then, a sudden noise, a soft thud, echoed from the kitchen, snapping her attention. With shaky breaths, she wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans and turned the flashlight toward the noise. The beam illuminated the doorway at the end of the hall. Shadows flickered, laughing in the corners of her eyes. Forcing one foot in front of the other, she crept towards the kitchen, pulse racing. With every step, the laughter grew louder, a chaotic symphony of gibbering voices that slithered under her skin, twisting her thoughts. The door creaked open. The kitchen was empty, but the air felt charged, electric with anticipation. Glancing around, she saw the fridge door slightly ajar, light seeping from within like a beacon. "Mommy!" the whisper came from inside the fridge. It was sweet and sickly, laced with something malicious, something that beckoned her closer. As she hesitated, its voice morphed into a chorus of her children calling for her. Please, what lay beyond that door? Was it a chance to reclaim her children, or the end of her sanity? Without time to think, she lunged forward, throwing the door wide open. There, shimmering in the unnatural light, were her children, suspended in a grotesque tableau, fingers curled around the edges of a portal that glimmered with darkness beyond comprehension. Their eyes locked onto hers, fear mingling with something else, desire? "Join us, Mommy!" As the air thickened, a terrible realization dawned. How much of her sanity would she sacrifice to save them? All around her, the shadows crept closer, transforming into something more sinister. Just as she gathered her strength to call out, the fridge door slammed shut, plunging her once again into darkness. "What have you done?" a voice taunted from within the shadows. Heart racing, Sarah spun around. Where was the exit? And then it was gone. The house seemed to sigh heavily, darkness overlapping like layers upon layers of dread. In a single, agonizing moment of clarity, she realized she was never truly alone. The echoing laughter emerged once more, growing louder, swallowing her thoughts whole. What did they want? And how much of herself was she willing to sacrifice to find out? The room felt suffocating now, a heavy weight pressing against Sarah's chest. She staggered backward into the kitchen, wishing to escape the oppressive atmosphere. Shadows flickered like candle flames dancing in a windless room, teasing her senses as if they were alive, whispering secrets she dared not grasp. "Mommy!" the voice slithered through the dimness, pulling her heart tighter in its grip. She couldn't tell if it was coming from the walls, the shadows, or if it emanated from her own tormented thoughts. She clutched the flashlight, its weak beam trembling as she tried to focus. Desperation clawed at her throat, when she finally turned it toward the fridge once more. The appliance stood ominously, its surface cold and daunting. Could her children still be trapped within? With a shaky breath, she regained some resolve. "I'm coming for you," Sarah murmured, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. She needed to push past the dread, to find a way to save them, to save herself. And yet, something in her gut twisted. What if this was a trap? As she approached, the fridge shuddered, as if responding to her inner turmoil. A low hum echoed, growing louder until it reverberated through her bones. She reached for the handle, her pulse quickening. The air felt thick, a premonition of dread wrapping around her. With a swift yank, she flung open the door, the frigid air washing over her. It was empty. Panic surged like a tidal wave. "No! No!" she screamed, the void of despair swallowing her cries. The light flickered, then surged brighter, an unnatural glow enveloping her. And suddenly she saw them. Lily and Josh stood at the end of a dismal corridor, their forms illuminated in the ghostly light. But they looked off. Their faces were pale, almost sickly. Eyes wide, they were staring right through her, not recognizing the frantic mother who stood twisted in anguish. "Come play with us, Mommy," their voices melded with the cackling laughter from the depths of the shadows, a horrific symphony that echoed off the walls. She took a step forward, but they shrank back into the obscured corners of the hallway. "No! Stay with me!" she cried, desperation clawing at her throat as she lunged toward them. Her heart beat like a war drum, each pulse synchronized with the laughter that filled the room. She was losing them, losing her grip on reality. Shadows flickered and writhed, dark tendrils inching closer, as if the house itself conspired against her. "Join us," they beckoned, pulling at her very essence, their faces morphing into contorted expressions of glee mixed with something darker, something sinister. The sound of the fridge door slamming shut echoed once more, sending a jolt through her body. "What has happened to you?" she sobbed, the gravity of despair dragging her down. The air thickened, suffocated by a sense of impending doom. All around her, walls leaned in, seeming to breathe, whispering secrets of fractured existence. "You can't have them," she shouted, unsure if she was speaking to the shadows or to the sinister echo of her own mind. But what did she have left to fight with? Desperate, Sarah clutched the flashlight like a burning torch against impending darkness. Abyssal blackness crept into her field of vision, thrusting her into a nightmare consumed by grotesque visions. Then came a piercing scream, a child's scream so ear-piercing and full of torment that Sarah felt her heart shatter. Lily. Josh. She had to reach them. Without thinking, she hurled the flashlight aside, plunging herself into the abyss. "I'm coming!" Silence fell like a heavy fog, wrapping around her. The darkness was thick and alive, pulsating, breathing. As her foot touched the floor, she stumbled, losing her balance. The world spun, and suddenly everything went black. In that darkness, a voice murmured softly, "Your sacrifice will not go unnoticed." Where was she? And what price would she truly pay to save her children? Despair tightened its suffocating grip. The bleakness pressed in, thick with the promise of terror yet to come. What waited for her when the lights returned? Sarah stood in the void, heart pounding. The darkness hummed around her, alive and vibrating with unseen malice. Straining her ears, she tried to catch the echoes of Lily and Josh, but their whispers faded like a dying ember. Then, a sharp crack sliced through the silence. Light. Flickering, stuttering at first like an old film reel. The memories of her children flared back into her mind, igniting fear. Where were they? Suddenly, the light stabilized, revealing a forgotten room. Walls stained with something dark covered in damp patches. The air was thick with a rancid smell. Sarah could sense her children nearby. She could feel it, a maternal instinct urging her to move, to search. Standing at the edge of the room, she noticed a door slightly ajar and bathed in the soft, cold glow of the light. It beckoned her. With every step, she felt the weight of the air grow heavier, like the house itself was warning her to turn back, but she pressed on. "Mommy!" The voice was faint, almost drowned by the broken whispers curling through the corners. But it was her children. It had to be. She pushed the door open, wincing as a rusted squeal echoed through the hallway. Beyond the threshold, darkness yawned wide, swallowing the dim light behind her. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped into the abyss, ready to confront whatever horror lay ahead. The air grew frigid, biting at her exposed skin. Cold tendrils of uncertainty coiled around her, but the faint sound of laughter, innocent yet chilling, broke through the dread. "Mommy! Over here!" Her heart soared, but only momentarily. As she ventured further, the corridor warped, stretching and contracting as if breathing. Sarah's breath quickened. Another turn revealed an old staircase spiraling down into the unknown, illuminated sporadically by a waning light. "Come play with us, Mommy," the voices echoed, reassuring yet twisted, their familiarity drowned in an unsettling undertone. They were close, so close. Steeling herself, she descended the stairs, each creak echoing like a death knell in the oppressive silence. At the bottom, she found a dusty room filled with forgotten toys, scattered and broken. It was a scene of discarded childhood, a glimpse into a past she clung to. But the joyful echoes felt tainted now. Lily and Josh stood in the corner, illuminated by a waning candle flickering on the ground. Their backs were turned to her. "Mommy, come join us!" They chanted in unison, their voices draped in layers of sweetness intertwined with something sinister. "Turn around," she commanded, desperation clawing at her throat. The shadows danced among their forms, twisting their innocent silhouettes into grotesque shapes. As they slowly turned, horror boiled in her stomach. Their eyes were hollow, soulless. Within that instant, she knew their bodies were there, but what remained was merely a shell, a blasphemous mimicry mocking her. "Mommy," they murmured, reaching toward her with skeletal hands. A chill gripped Sarah, freezing her in place. "No! You're not my children." Her voice trembled, but drove her forward. Adrenaline propelled her as she lunged toward them, desperate to reclaim what had been snatched away, but the room-warped walls pulsating like a living beast. Shadows thickened, pressing in. Laughter morphed into cries, revealing a twisted chorus of anguish. "Mommy, come play," they pleaded, a cacophony of 1,000 lost souls filling the air.in that moment. Something shifted. Sarah's resolve hardened. If they were not her children, she would fight for the real ones. As she lunged forward, darkness erupted around her, a tsunami of blackness threatening to swallow her whole. "Your choice, Sarah, what will you give?" The voice slithered closer, echoing in her mind. And in the chaos, one horrifying question consumed her. What was she willing to sacrifice to save her true children? Another scream pierced the darkness, breaking her heart all over again. The stakes were rising. What awaited her in this malevolent realm? The tug of darkness pulled Sarah deeper, twisting her form into a hollow shadow as she felt the stagnant air clutch at her throat. The voices of her children echoed, haunting yet seductive, blending with the swirling nothingness. "Mommy, don't you see? We've been waiting." She fought against the insidious pull, refusing to drift back into despair. "I'm coming for you," she shouted, her voice quivering yet defiant. Every step she took pushed against the vibrant darkness, the soulless eyes of her children mocking her with their empty gaze. As this grotesque facade closed in, the walls pulsed, throbbing with the agony of every lost child. It was a suffocating embrace, the cries of the damned scratching at her ears. They were there, lingering, lurking just beyond the grasp of understanding. "Stay back," she cried, vision blurring with tears that refused to fall. An unsettled air pressed against her consciousness, making her feel as if she were on the edge of madness itself. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, yet she felt an unyielding force driving her forward. "Mommy," the ethereal whispers coiled tighter, teasing the edges of her mind. Somewhere deep within, she caught a glimpse of relief, the light of truth. But then, a sudden shift. The room twisted, yanking her along as images retaliated against the reality she clung to. Flickering images danced before her. Snippets of laughter in the sun, the warmth of her children's hands held tight, sticky with sweetness. Hope erupted inside her, pushing against the dark tide. With renewed determination, she charged through the chaos that defined this dreadful place. The walls screamed, the very fabric of the realm writhing in protest. "What do you want?" Sarah screamed, the demand breaking free from her lips as she surged forward. "Your heart, your soul, a piece of you." The voice snarled, a slithering serpent instilling doubt. Its tone dripped with loathing, wrapping around her thoughts. "Without a sacrifice, you cannot be free." Terror struck like a shockwave. What could she possibly give? Looking back at the silhouettes of her children, Hope wrestled with dread. What if releasing a part of herself could save them? In that harrowing moment, she hesitated. "Mommy, we just want to play." The hollow whispers lured her, the shadows waltzing closer, fingers beckoning. "Stop!" she yelled, clenching her fists. She would not yield. She would not allow this hell to define her. Summoning every ounce of her being, she pushed against the darkness. The floor beneath her trembled, shadows circling like predators. "Choose!" they hissed, the weight of centuries slumping onto her. Sarah's heart raced. She clenched her teeth, resisting the claws of despair. "No! I will not give you anything." The walls rippled with agitation in response to her defiance. The laughter morphed into howls of rage, engulfing her. Every heartbeat thundered in her ears, threatening to drown her. The air shimmered, a blinding flash threatening to erase her from this dreadful reality. And yet, in the midst of the chaos, a fleeting thought sparked a fragment of clarity cutting through the turmoil. "If something had to be sacrificed, let it be me," she cried out, feeling the ground shake. Suddenly, the echoes transformed, the shadows recoiled. Was hope flickering to life, or was it a cruel trick? The laughter turned to wails, distorting as they reverberated back through her mind. "Then you must pay a price," the voice purred, the words dripping with malice. "What price?" She steadied herself, every muscle taut with anticipation, terror quilling within. "Your memory, your strength, your love. What will you sacrifice for them?" Time stilled. Her heart thundered with a fierce urgency, dread and determination intertwined. The next moment, the walls split and splintered, revealing glimpses of another shadowed room beyond. Breath hitching in her throat, Sarah stepped forward, bracing for whatever would come next. What awaited on the other side? Would her sacrifice be enough to save her children, or had she sealed their fate and her own? The air shimmered with a heavy, electric pulse as Sarah stepped through the rift created by her desperate choice. Uncertainty gnawed at her, but she could not bear the thought of losing her children. "Josh!" "Lily!" she cried out, the names tumbling from her lips with the urgency of a storm. The shadows grew thinner, swirling away like mist, revealing a dimly lit room. It was filled with soft, muted light as if it were a dream. The atmosphere felt less oppressive, but Sarah's heart thudded with trepidation. Where were her children? She spun around, fighting back the terror that threatened to consume her resolve. "Mommy?" The voice was small, weaving its way toward her like a caress. Sarah's heart lifted, but her breath caught in her throat. "Where are you?" she called, feeling the warmth of her maternal instinct surge anew. The shadows darted to the edges, retreating into corners, as tiny giggles broke through the crystalline silence. It sounded like her children. "Over here!" They sang in unison. Following the sound, Sarah found herself in another corridor, the walls painted a soft pastel hue, decorated with pictures and drawings made by little hands. Every step felt lighter, each creak of the floorboards a promise of safety. As she turned the corner, there they were. Josh and Lily stood at the end, their faces radiant and familiar, free from the macabre shadows that had twisted them before. "Mommy!" they called again, arms outstretched, innocence radiating from their smiles. With tears in her eyes, she rushed forward, wrapping them both in a tight embrace. Their warmth felt like sunlight breaking through the darkest clouds. "I thought I lost you," she whispered, relief flooding through her like a warm tide. "What happened?" Josh asked, looking up at her wide-eyed. "It's okay. You're safe now." Sarah squeezed them tighter, but a nagging doubt fluttered at the back of her mind. Had they really escaped? "Mommy, don't let go," Lily said, her voice soft but tinged with urgency. "I want tea," Sarah promised, unwavering as she pulled back slightly to look at them. But as she gazed into their innocent faces, a flicker of darkness danced at the edge of her vision. Panic gripped her heart. "We need to go. Now!" Without another word, she led them down the corridor, their tiny hands clutching at her fingers like lifelines. But as they moved, the walls began to pulsate again, shadows coiling threateningly around them. "Stay close," Sarah commanded, dread pooling in her stomach. Just then, a sinister laugh echoed through the air, filling every corner of the space. The shadows thickened, become ravenous beasts seeking to reclaim their prey. "You think you can just leave?" a voice hissed, chilling Sarah's bones. "Run!" she shouted, pushing her way forward with her children at her side. They darted deeper into the maze-like hallways, the laughter following them like a predatory echo. They raced past door after door, each one holding a dark secret, each one threatening to pull them back into madness. But Sarah's protective instinct drove her onward, the sound of her children's laughter mixed with her own pounding heart giving her strength. Finally, they reached a door that looked different from the others. It shimmered softly, beckoning them with a glow that promised safety. With no time to think, Sarah flung open the door and stepped through, pulling her children behind her. The moment they crossed the threshold, a rush of fresh air enveloped them, washing away the darkness. They stumbled into a lush, sun-drenched meadow, where flowers cascaded around them in vibrant splashes of color. "Mommy!" Lily gasped, marveling at the beauty. "Is this heaven?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah said, glancing over her shoulder. The door they had just exited stood resolutely against the darkness, the shadows clawing at it, desperate to break through. But here, they were free. "We need to stay together," Sarah said firmly, taking her children as hands. "Nothing can take us away again." In that moment, they formed a circle, their bond stronger than any darkness that threatened to invade. And even as the sinister laughter echoed faintly from the doorway behind them, Sarah took a deep breath, embracing her children tightly, knowing they had conquered a nightmare. "Together," she whispered fiercely, and as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting beams of hope across the meadow, Sarah felt a warmth envelop them, love, unconditional and eternal. They had passed through the darkness and returned to the light. "Let us go home," she said finally, and together, they stepped forward into their new beginning. This is it, folks. Can you believe how this all turned out? If you love this heart-pounding conclusion, you need to subscribe now to stay updated on more exclusive stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to show your love and to keep the algorithm thriving. Don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. What do you think really happened in the basement? We need to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support matters so much, and only true fans understand the importance of these actions. Let us keep this community strong.